And now we'll start the study. And we're in chapter 6. We're actually in the last section of Pirke Avot. We're reading the section that kind of all talks about how important it is to study Torah and the great things that we get from Torah, right? We get the part that we read last time talked about the different stages that we go through by studying what we get to do and how it helps us. And so this last chapter, chapter 6, is really a guide for the rabbis themselves and for their students who are going to be rabbis, why it is they're supposed to be engaging in this study, right? And so this section that we're reading today is, and also again, obviously, a lot of times we're bringing in quotes from other parts of the Bible. So the one that we just read finished with one little quote from Esther, which was about how you give credit to somebody who you're teaching. You teach something in their name, and you always give credit, which we read at the end last week with this little quote from Esther. And we actually began with a similar lesson, which was from Psalms, which is the story of, and we reviewed the story of Achitophel, who also gives counsel. And it says that that when we give counsel that in somebody's name, even if the person wasn't a good person, this is the thing we read about Achitophel, who taught David stuff, and then David gave him credit and called him a friend, even though he was not a friend, even though he turned on David. So we respect people who teach us things. So that's kind of what we're reading, and some similar themes today. Though this one is going to be an interesting kind of take on the book of Proverbs, which we're going to read probably in about 3 or 4 months, maybe longer, on Tuesdays. But Proverbs is very similar in a way to Pirke Avot because it's lines of wisdom. Now, Pirke Avot, in some cases, obviously chapter 6, these are long paragraphs. These are organized by paragraphs. Proverbs are literally lines, or one line. There was one sentence, like this one right here. And this one leads to some other lines, but let's take a look at it. Great is the Torah, for it gives life to those that practice it, in this world and in the world to come. As it is said, for there are life unto those that find them, and health to all their flesh. So that's a line directly from Proverbs. Now, it says it will be a cure for your navel and marrow for your bones. That's also from Proverbs, from chapter 3. And then this line, it says, and it says, she is a tree of life to those who grasp her, and whoever holds it onto her. Right? So this is a very famous line from the book of Proverbs. So this is what Proverbs looks like. Here's this proverb we just read. So like well, I'll show you. Here's verse 18. Eitz chaim hi lamachazikim ba v'tomchecha meushar. Eitz chaim hi lamachazikim ba v'tomchecha meushar. We say that when we close the ark after we're done reading the Torah. So this line, Eitz chaim hi, is, this one's also, we actually reverse these lines. Darcheha, darcheno, v'chol netivoteha, shalom. And then we finish, Hashivenu Adonai, which is actually from the book of Lamentations. It's not from that. So it's a combination of different lines. But here's also a different combination of those lines. And it takes the words Eitz chaim hi. She is a tree of life to those that grasp her, and whoever holds on to her is happy. And it says, for they are a graceful wreath upon your head, a necklace about your throat, also from Proverbs. And it says, she'll adorn your head with a graceful wreath, crown you with a glorious diadem, which is from chapter 4. Sounds a lot like that one. And it says, in her right hand is a length of days, in her left, riches and honor. And that's another line. And then the last line, and it says, for they will bestow on you length of days, years of life, and peace. So these are all lines from Proverbs. And what's interesting again about it, let's just go back real quick, is that when we look at Proverbs, that a lot of Proverbs is about seeking wisdom, about understanding things. This is some of, again, chapter 3, a lot of it was just quoted. Look, see? This is all lines from Proverbs. Now, what's interesting about it, it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, talking about God. But notice it also says, and again, this is all about God. Then it turns in here, it says, happy is the man who finds wisdom, the man who attains understanding. Her value is in trade is better than gold and silver, her yield greater than gold. She is more precious than rubies. All of your goods cannot equal her. In her right hand is the length of days. We just read this quote. In her left, riches and honor. Her ways are pleasant and all her paths are peaceful. So notice when it's talking about God, it was definitely using a male form. So here, when it's talking about wisdom, it's clearly using the female form. Yeah, their wisdom. Wisdom is a female form. In Hebrew, the word chokhmah, right? Bechokhmah, that is a feminine noun. And so we use the word for wisdom, and all the words around it will be in the feminine form. Well, not all of them. This one says those who grasp her, the ones who grasp or grasping her, that's a male form of, or male plural form. But notice again, when it says tree of life, we use that word for the Torah, right? But here, it's in its context here, it's talking about wisdom. Now, again, we'll say that's the Torah, but here it's clearly talking about it as wisdom. The wisdom is the tree of life, right? And then again, it talks about God, but it also talks about wisdom. And that is how it goes back and forth between the male and female form, which also, again, tells us that even if we don't use feminine form for God, it's not like we don't use feminine form for divine ideas, divine attributes. So we use the feminine form both for Torah and for wisdom. And we know too, when we refer to the Shabbat, we usually refer to Shabbat in the feminine form too. So there's a lot of parts or aspects of holy, divine, that we do refer as in the feminine, but especially Chokhmah, which again is similar in Greek. It's the word Sophia, and wisdom is referred to as in the feminine form in Greek, and then later on in the church too. So the big church in Istanbul, that was the main church for the Byzantine Empire, was called the Hagia Sophia, which means holy wisdom. It was turned into a mosque when the Turks conquered it. But it's still the ornate design of the amazing, if you've never been to Hagia Sophia, it's one of the most amazing buildings in the world. And it was a church built in the name of holy wisdom. So again, when the Greeks translated the Bible, Chokhmah became Sophia, and was an easy way of translating it, and it was a feminine form too. And that's why, to some extent, Sophia or Sophie was oftentimes a Jewish name because it was from the Hebrew for Chokhmah anyways. So it was not it was a similar idea already in Greek. But yeah, you could see it. I mean, some people, by the way, I don't know, it's a great argument, but some people feel that Proverbs was written under a Greek influence, that it was written late and it reflects actually the Greek influence. But I'm not 100% sure that that's the case. I don't know that it had to be, because there are other forms, even in the Torah, that start to indicate that there are parts, or there's ways of not only using male forms of the divine. So anyways, this is again here, it's not wisdom. It says right from the beginning, it's the Torah. So they're not going to talk about wisdom outside of the Torah, and it's interchangeable. But here again, and we do that too, as I said, when we open up the ark and close the ark and we say it's time, we're quoting that part, and it's for the Torah. We don't say this is wisdom, we say this is Torah. So they use it interchangeably. Now this text is not ascribed to anybody. Doesn't say who said it. This one does, and the next couple of them do. But look at this one in particular, because it actually says Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh said in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. So Shimon ben Yochai was a famous rabbi from the Mishnaic period. And so his student, who's also named Shimon, teaches this text in his teacher's honor, right? In his teacher's words, right? Here's what he says. Beauty, strength, riches, honor, wisdom, gray hair, and children are becoming to the righteous and becoming to the world. As it is said, gray hair is a crown of glory, beauty. It is attained by way of righteousness, which again comes from Proverbs. And it says the ornament of the wise is their wealth, also from Proverbs. And it says the glory of youth is their strength, and the beauty of old men is their gray hair. Yeah, the gray hair, right? And it says grandchildren are the glory of their elders, and the glory of children is their parents. Interesting. And it says, then the moon shall be ashamed, and the sun shall be abashed. For the Lord of hosts will reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and God's honor will be revealed to his elders. Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh said, these 7 qualities, which the sages have listed as becoming to the righteous, were all of them fulfilled in Rabbi and his sons. And when they're talking about Rabbi, they're talking about Judah Hanasi, the rabbi who edited together the Mishnah from the family of Hillel, Rabbi Judah Hanasi. So Rabbi Shimon says he added that little part. So his teacher taught this part, and then he adds this part, which is that his benefactor, his teacher, the greatest person in his day, which is Judah Hanasi, is the embodiment of this. Well, that's a great way to also kiss up to the guy in charge, the guy who's editing the book. But he does say that when you look at these qualities, these are all things. And again, the last line is from Isaiah. It's not from Proverbs. But when we look at these other lines, these other quotes from Proverbs, that what really is admirable in our tradition are people who have attained a certain maturity, right? And that seems to be the theme, even when it's not the theme. It's the theme of this text, which is there's a certain dignity and there's a certain special attribute to people who have grown older, right? So they're definitely saying that people who have a connection to in this case again, well, people who are righteous, but people who are also taking wisdom seriously are actually also they're going to be successful. So all of these things, which are all great things, beauty, strength, riches, honor, wisdom, old age, gray hair, and children. I'm not sure why they put old age in. No, I'm not sure why they put that in brackets. Let me just say. So they put koach. And by the way, I mean, it's like, you want to have all these things, right? You don't want to have just one. You don't want to have old age, but not strength, right? So he puts anoy hakoach v'osher. That's the beauty, strength, and wisdom. Beauty, strength, and wealth. Kavod is honor. Chochmah is wisdom. Skena is elder, reaching an older status. And then the last two, no, the last one is just raising children, having children. If you look at that, I'm not sure why they put old age in quotes in the brackets, but it is skena. It's the word we said is being an older person. So, being an elder. But as I mentioned before, it also conveys this kind of seniority, a certain kind of status of being recognized as being a leader because of your age. But these are all good things. I mean, these are all things that you should have all of. It's not like you should not have. It's not like you should have just one of these. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, okay. And then the children part is beyond that, but yeah, those are the blessings that we can look for. Now, this next text is a longer text, much longer text. It's also attributed to a rabbi. And what's interesting about this one, as opposed to most of what we read in Pirke Avot, is that this is like a story. What we normally read are just wisdom sayings, right? This is like a story that we have in other parts of the Talmud, not really in the Mishnah, because the Mishnah is usually just lines of law. This is not what we find in the Mishnah. This is what we find in the Talmud and in the Midrash. We find stories. So this is a story. We've had like mini stories in Pirke Avot. I wouldn't say mini stories, but like, Hillel saw a skull floating in the water and said this person killed other people and then he was killed. I mean, it's not exactly a story, but it's a little bit of a contextual, situation. But it doesn't usually happen. Most of the lines are just, this is what he said. But look at this. So Rabbi Yossi ben Kizma once said, once I was walking by the way when a man met me and greeted me, and I greeted him. He said to me, Rabbi, where are you from? I said to him, I'm from a great city of sages and scribes. He said to me, Rabbi, would you consider living with us in our place? I would give you 1,000 denarii of gold and precious stones and pearls. And I said to him, my son, even if you were to give me all the silver and gold, precious stones and pearls that are in the world, I would not dwell anywhere except in a place of Torah. For when a man passes away, there accompany him neither gold, nor silver, nor precious stones, nor pearls, but Torah and good deeds alone. As it is said, when you walk, it will lead you. When you lie down, it will watch over you. And when you are awake, it will talk with you. Again, a line from Proverbs. When you walk, it will lead you in this world. When you lie down, it will watch over you in the grave. And when you awake, it will talk with you in the world to come. And thus it is written in the book of Psalms by King David, king of Israel. I prefer the teaching you proclaim to thousands of pieces of gold and silver. which is from Psalms. And it says, mine is the silver and mine is the gold, says the Lord of hosts. And that's from the prophet Haggai, which we're going to read in a few weeks on Tuesday morning. So you can see sometimes the minor prophets make their way into the commentaries and into the Talmud. Not a lot, but sometimes, the more famous the prophet, the more likely they are to quote him, like Isaiah that we just read. But occasionally these other books get in. So that's why it's always good to be familiar with them and to read them in the original context. But here again, quotes from Proverbs, which we've been reading, a lot of those references, and here's Psalms and Haggai. So let's talk about this. So the guy basically comes to him and says, would you stay in our city, right? And I'll pay you a lot of money. And he says, I'm not going to stay here unless this was a place of Torah in the first place. So he tries to buy him. He says, I wouldn't do it because I need to be in a place where there's Torah. Because again, the line he says here, which you've heard many times, is you can't take it with you, right? There's no gold or silver in the world to come, right? Right? When you die, you can't take it with you. They don't accompany you. It's not there, but only Torah and good deeds. That's what you take with you to the next world. And what's interesting about this is the way he quotes Proverbs. Again, if you look at the context from Proverbs, it says, again, with regards to learning or teaching, it doesn't say necessarily Torah, but it says father's commandment, mother's teaching. When you walk, it will lead you. When you lie down, it will watch over you. When you wake, it will talk with you. Then it goes on. The commandment is a lamp, the teaching is a light, the way of life is the rebuke that disciplines. So this is a line from Proverbs, and you can see it's a threefold, both of these are threefold lines. The next line, you'll keep you from an evil woman, from the smooth tongue of a forbidden woman. So then it goes into some other stuff. But these are both threefold lines, right? Walk, lie down, and when you're awake, right? And there it says, commandment is a lamp, the teaching is a light, and the way of life is the rebuke that disciplines. So these are two threefold lines back to back. So this one, which they just quoted, then they interpret it in a really interesting way, which is that this applies to three different places that you'll find yourself. Living in this world, dying, and then the world to come.
What was that last one?
The world to come, living in the world to come. Now, what's interesting about this is that this just betrayed something of their belief about the world to come.
Say that again?
This betrays something about their belief in the world to come, which may or may not be part of our belief about what happens after we die, but it was probably at least a transitional belief of people in the biblical period into the rabbinic period. How do we get from one place to the other? We've talked about the fact that in the Bible, we talked about it, I think yesterday, about Sheol, that it's used in combination or in connection with Mavet, with death. So that death and Sheol are used together. And again, is Sheol the netherworld or is it death? There they were used together. So it's very possible that, again, at this time, well, it's not possible. You just saw it. So I'm only explaining it. You just read it. It says right here, this world, in the grave, and the world to come. That means there are three places that we exist. That's interesting because then it gets into some problematic situations, right? So the world that we live in, this world that we're in right now, that's the easiest one for us to discuss because that's the one we existed. The next two are difficult because we haven't existed in them yet, necessarily. Unless everything is happening at the same time, which means we're already in the world to come and we're already also gone.
And you know,
I know.
there's more years behind me than there is in front of me.
Yes, well, so what does this mean? Well, let's think about what this means. This means that at least what they just said is that there is a state of being dead that is not living in the world to come. So that's then opens up a whole interesting situation, which is there a time that we're in the grave, or is there a time we're not alive, but not in the world to come? And how long is that time?
It depends.
Now, most people would say that doesn't sound like a great existence. Being in the grave does not sound like fun. Well, it definitely doesn't sound like being in heaven. So this idea that now it does say when you lie down, it will watch over you. That means that Torah and good deeds, right? It says Torah and good deeds will be with you in all these places. So that means when you're in the grave, the Torah and good deeds will watch over you. And then it says that when you wake, it will talk with you in the world to come. So the understanding here to some extent is that the Torah and good deeds protect you when you're in the grave, which, by the way, seems to imply that we need to be protected or watched over when we're in the grave. Now, this is important because what did people believe at this time? What did Jews believe? Now there's a new religion that's coming out of Judaism right at this time, Christianity. What do they believe? And at least what it seems like, I mean, we have their writings, we know what they believed. There was a point in time, this point in time, about 100, this is only 100 years after Jesus. There was a point in time where Christians were still believing that they are not going to be resurrected until Jesus comes back, which means they can be buried. And when Jesus comes back, then they get to be resurrected, but not until that time. Now, it's an interesting question. If you ask Christians, what do they believe? Do they go to heaven after they die? Or are they only going to be resurrected when the Messiah comes, when Jesus comes? It's an interesting issue, and it's one that some people probably haven't talked about, or maybe they haven't learned or discussed it with their pastors, or they haven't thought about it themselves. But it's an interesting question because there was a point in time when almost every Christian believed that. This was a new religion. But then as time went on, people were like, well, wait a second. Are people just sleeping for 2,000 years? What's been happening for the last 2,000 years? Do these people that are supposed to be resurrected, do they literally, like, what happens? And, look, interesting beliefs and interesting practices come out of that. So you have well, you've seen them before because you watch TV and see historical documentaries and see things like that. But if you've ever seen those huge mausoleums and they're kind of scary catacombs where they keep heads, right? Skulls. The reason they kept the skull was because they thought that if a person gets resurrected with their skull, like everything else could come back. Like, at least let's keep that. And they kept the bones, or they keep big bones, because like, at least they'll have that and they can be resurrected from the bone. So people kept those bones. Sometimes, again, the practices were based on this idea that that's what you had to have in order to be resurrected in the body. So we kind of just saw that. We kind of just saw understanding that maybe we don't get our bodies until a later time. That, by the way, is based on this idea that when we talk about life after death in Judaism, that we're actually talking about a physical resurrection of the body. And so for people who believed that, and again, Jews at this time seem to have believed that, Christians definitely believe that, very important to them, was that when they get into the world to come, if there is a time where our spirit exists, even if it's immediately after we die, there will be another point in time where our bodies and our spirits will be resurrected together or be combined back together. And we will be both body and spirit once again. I will tell you that that was more apparent in this type of text than you'll have later on. But it is important for us as Jews. It's the reason that we still believe that we're supposed to bury a body instead of cremating it. It's the reason why we still, when a person gets blown up by a terrorist, we collect every scrap of their body so that we can bury it. I had this issue on October 7th when they blew up cars with RPGs. You know what the government decided to do? They had no choice, really, because the Orthodox in the community said, we can't do anything other. They buried the whole car.
Yeah.
They buried the car because there's no way to separate the body from the car. So they buried the car. They buried cars, which is not an easy thing to do.
If Orthodox Jew passes away, I mean, someone has to stay with the body.
Yes, it's why we have a shomer. It's why we have a guard, right? So the body could not be desecrated. But it's also the reason why some people said, not many, but there is a fraction of Jews today who are opposed to organ donation for the same reason. So these beliefs and these teachings have practical ramifications. And you can see that here. You can see this beginning to, like, there was a time when Jews didn't necessarily believe that the body had to be intact in order for there to be a life after death. Here, when we read a line, thank you, Joanne, too, for reminding us of the tradition of a shomer. When you lie down in the grave, it will watch over you. It's the word that's used. So the reason why somebody needs a shomer at all, right, is because, as it says right here, when you lie down, right? Tishmor alecha. It will watch over you, shomer. It's exactly what happens when we die, is that we need to still be watched. So to protect us from other people, we have a person who watches us, a shomer. Yes.
Definitely, I mean, I know that they do believe in cremating Jews.
Yes, I was at a service today where a Jew was cremated. They buried his ashes. They buried his ashes, though. Yes.
How come it's more acceptable?
Because people do lots of things that are not Jewish tradition today. I mean, why are you asking me that? How many things do people do today that they didn't used to do? I mean, like, I mean, I'm not the judge of this stuff, so I'm not gonna. No, but so look, if people don't keep Shabbos anymore, if they don't keep kosher anymore, what are they gonna? I mean, like, who am I to decide which is the law that they have to keep? They want to be cremated, and I mean, like, I don't know what people do, but I know. Look, the person wasn't a congregant, so I can say I don't. I mean, I would ask for permission, maybe, right, if you knew the person. But the person who was buried today wanted to be cremated. His son is more religious than him. He didn't want his dad cremated, but that was his orders. It was his orders. He had to do it. But wait, the father wanted his ashes. I don't want to say this in front of Doreen, but he wanted his ashes strewn over the UCLA practice field. Or maybe she's okay. Maybe because she's a USC fan. I'm joking, Doreen. So he wanted to be buried at UCLA practice field. Well, the guy wouldn't do it. Wouldn't throw his dad's ashes there. That's what the will said that.
I understand.
But he buried his dad. Of course not. It's against the law. But he could have just done it. Could have done it. Look, yeah, it's against the law, but you know.
Against the law, bury a dog.
Yes. So he didn't do it. He didn't do it because to him it violated Jewish law. He wanted to respect his dad's body. He buried his dad in a Jewish cemetery. So, look, his dad asked him to violate not Jewish law, but regular law, so he wouldn't do it. But he also then followed Jewish law. So, yes, the answer is people figure out ways to come to terms with these things. Yes,
Another question.
yes. That happened today, by the way. Yeah.
Isn't it so that if you had a tattoo or whatever, you changed your body, that also at one time, you couldn't be buried in a Jewish cemetery unless it was against.
So that is the Bubba Misa that if you were tattooed, you couldn't be buried in Jerusalem. That was not true. They told people, no, they told people that so they wouldn't do it. But the reason that the logic behind it wasn't based on nothing. I don't want to say that it was a made up, completely made up Baba Misa, but it was based on this idea, which is that if you violated Jewish tradition, you were not supposed to be buried in a Jewish cemetery. Okay.
It was against the wall.
Whatever. Yes, there was a special area where they would be buried. That was considered to be for the people who didn't follow Jewish law, which by the way, went also towards people who committed suicide. They're supposed to be buried there, right? So here was the idea. The idea was that you violated Jewish law, and so you weren't really part of the community anymore. So the understanding was that if you got a tattoo, you violated Jewish law. It was kind of ridiculous because if somebody got a tattoo, they probably didn't follow Jewish law. They weren't keeping kosher. They weren't doing other stuff. It wasn't like somebody just said, I'm going to go out and get a tattoo. That's ridiculous. It would never happened. That never happened. Okay. So it wasn't it. So that was above a mice from the standpoint of the guy ran out, got a tattoo, and then he couldn't be buried in a Jewish cemetery. That never happened. But people said it because they knew that if you violated Jewish law, you couldn't be buried in a Jewish cemetery. Not true. It's definitely not true today. And if they did not let Jews who violated Jewish law be buried in a Jewish cemetery, there'd be no people in the cemetery. So it's definitely not true. But it is kind of a Baba Misa that has been perpetrated and perpetuated, and people continue to hear that, but it's not true. So it is, everybody knows that now. Or I want everybody to know that now. It's just not true. But again, back to this issue of burial and what happens to us after we die. This idea, there's a transitionary period where we're in the grave but not resurrected or not in the world to come is interesting. But it also could be that our bodies are in the grave, but that our spirits are in the world to come. And the body and the spirit will be resurrected together. So that is a possibility too. We don't dwell on it a lot, but this is the three different stages: living, burial, and then in the world to come. So how long is that period? Is that part of however long until we have our bodies and our spirits resurrected together? I don't know. But there are Christians who 100% believe that until the resurrection, we are not in the world to come. Seventh-day Adventists, for example, believe that. So when they're dead, when somebody in their family dies, and I know this because Glynis, who lives with us for a long time and who we're very close to, is very, very involved with her church. And we've had discussions about their teachings. And a Seventh-day Adventist teaching is that when you die, you are asleep until the resurrection. And when you get resurrected, then you're in heaven. But until that time, there is not heaven. You are sleeping until that time. So I said, really? Because unfortunately, her mom just died. So your mom, her mom came to Israel with us, by the way. That might have killed her, by the way.
What?
Yeah.
What you said?
She,
Your mom?
no, her mom. My mom wanted to go to Israel. She didn't die because she went to Israel, but she died 3 weeks later too. But no, Glynis's mom went to Israel and was very sick there and never really came back. So, but she always wanted to go to Israel. So anyways, the point is that interesting, her mom was no longer a practicing Seventh-day Adventist. She became Mormon. But anyways, that was her mom. That was Miss Ivy, who was an amazing lady, really amazing lady. So, but yeah, that's what Glynis believes happens to you after you die. That even if you're a good person, well, I guess if you're a good person, you're going to be resurrected. But if you're not a good person, you just keep sleeping. But yeah, you get resurrected. When the resurrection happens, that's when you go to heaven. Yeah, Jesse, you were gonna say something.
I'm just trying to figure out where this obsession about the world to come from, because it's not in,
The Torah.
no, it's not in Torah, it's in scripture, but it's not in Torah, and I
So-
don't get the idea of being obsessed with the world to come.
No, it's not really even much in the Bible. The whole
But
Tanakh.
even some of the prophetic sayings of, Isaiah or Zechariah.
Yes.
are mostly just saying Messiah will come to bring us back
Peace.
to our
Yes.
physical home on
Yes,
earth.
yes.
And so it's not about a thing to come, and it doesn't make much sense to me either, where it's, God goes through all this trouble to make the earth, why would we be so concerned about not being on the earth, like he made it for us?
So when does this become an issue?
And then I also see that.
So when do you think it becomes an issue? When do you think this obsession with the world to come happens?
During the diaspora,
During during
the exile.
exile, during the exile, and during a point in time where after, again, it shows a development in Jewish belief that we no longer are thinking about our communal homeland, we're not going to judge our salvation, if you will, though we would hardly call it in the terms that we use today. But what is our goal, right? What are we working towards? What is our ideal outcome? It moved in from the Bible to, again, in the Bible, it is, you'll live in peace in your land. And that's what we're striving for. It went from that to a personal individual being resurrected or being in the world to come. This was a point where, again,
so already in the Bible, Deuteronomy says, you're gonna get kicked out of the land. So
Yes.
They already knew that.
but being kicked out of the land, and again, and you have it throughout the prophets, is the restoration, and that you will come back to the land and you will live on the land again, right? That's the hope.
Yeah, but
It's not till hundreds of years later and well after the Bible's already established where people start saying, okay, I get it. Being on the land is important, but what is our objective? To get to heaven. That isn't in the Bible. It is in the rabbinic texts over and over. Like you said, is it an obsession? Well, it's definitely not what they're talking about. We want to have, the rabbis aren't talking about, let's have the Messiah come back and reestablish our dynasty. Now, you could say that part of that issue, by the way, is written at a time when the Jews were really scared of upsetting the Romans into thinking that's what we're really trying to do. Because there was a branch of Judaism that was bent on reestablishing Jewish sovereignty over the land. That's why the Bar Kokhba revolt happened in 130, right? It happened during the time of, and that's why Rabbi Akiva was killed. Rabbi Akiva wasn't killed because he was teaching people they're going to heaven. He was killed because he was teaching people that Bar Kokhba is Messiah that we've been waiting for, and he's going to reestablish Jewish sovereignty. That's why he was killed. I mean, they said he was killed for teaching the Torah. He was killed for doing that. He was killed for helping Jews see that their political restoration was what they should be moving towards. And think about it. Those ideas were happening simultaneously, where the rabbis were saying, let's not focus on our restoration as a country. Let's focus on our personal salvation. Let's focus on getting to heaven. There was a point in time when those ideas were floating around simultaneously. And what, of course, happened for the last 2,000 years is the focus then became on heaven and not on the political restoration. Was the political restoration there in the background? Yes, it's always been there, which is why when Israel was reestablished, we started saying that again. But the interesting question, though, Jesse, is do we go back to that understanding of what are we really working towards? Are we working towards, is our goal, our ultimate goal, keeping Jewish power in the land of Israel, or is it getting to heaven? And I don't know what the future is going to hold for us, because if you ask a lot of Jews, I might be one of them. You could say, what is the comfort that you will have? What are you aspiring for? For what would you see as your hope? Is it for your body and your soul to be resurrected? Well, that'd be nice, I guess. Depends which body I get. Do I get my 25-year-old body or do I get my 55-year-old body? But the other issue is if I had a choice to really focus on something that I know could happen, wouldn't it be that I hope and pray that the Jewish people get to live in freedom in the land of Israel and peace?
Well, that's
I could
what-
say that that's maybe my goal again. I go back to the biblical vision.
Well, I would say that's a biblical thing too, because there's more antagonism towards the political restructuring than anything, right? Because a Jew says, I want to study and get to heaven, nobody says anything, but a Jew says, I want a country, the whole world's against it.
Well, that's part of the challenge of it. You can make the argument, that's what I don't want to, why I wouldn't do it. Why some Jews go, don't bother me about Israel. I'll worry about, and there are Jews, by the way, who say that, who say, I'll worry about getting to heaven or creating a more, whatever, a better person. But I will tell you that, at least for me, I can't prove the existence of heaven. But I can prove the existence of the land of Israel and why it's important. I can prove it by October 7th. So what I say to people is, if you want to talk about something for the salvation, for our idea of what am I aspiring to, that's what I'm aspiring to. Doing what I can in this world to make sure that future generations have the safety and security of Israel, which is the biblical goal.
It's also
That's the
what-
Deuteronomy goal.
But that's also what the teachings of the rabbis are saying anyways, because they're saying the whole point is to teach others so they live well, and then they need to reflect that on you. It's like that whole thing is to keep a physical
True.
thing going, because if.
True, but you asked a very good question, which is, what's the obsession about the world to come?
Yeah, but I'm saying that the rabbis are almost putting themselves in that, right? Because if the whole point is the ethereal, then you wouldn't worry about teaching other people.
Well,
You wouldn't worry about teaching the young.
so you get to an interesting point, right? Which is what is Judaism at the end, even rabbinic Judaism telling us, which is it depends on what's happening in this world. You understand? It's
Yeah.
what's happening in this world. And what are we doing, like you said, to help perpetuate those teachings and making sure that that's what's going to happen.
That's the only teaching that's focused on both the ethereal and the physical, because I was talking with friends at a Christian Bible study about that. And they had said that, a friend of mine said that he had to believe in Jesus and he had to believe in an afterlife, because otherwise he wouldn't see a point in this one.
Yeah, that's troubling, right?
Yeah.
I hope Jesse heard that. I mean, you heard what Jesse said. That again, in talking to Christians, when you hear those kinds of statements of, well, what's the point then? That is disturbing. It's disturbing because it allows for a certain, I don't know what you want to call it. I mean, it's somewhat nihilistic, but it's also, it demeans this world. It demeans the creation of this world,
I
which
still
is
want to find
disturbing.
that reference you mentioned like months ago about the 4 questions that God asks you when you're in the heavenly court.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Because I really like that answer. That really
We
stuck
can't,
with me.
are you guys talking there? Because we can't hear you. Are you guys? We can, I just noticed that. We can't hear them.
No, I heard Joyce earlier.
Joyce, are you there?
I'm here. I
Okay.
wasn't talking though.
Oh, so Jesse was.
I'm also here. I wasn't talking, but I was hearing other people who
So I
were.
was hoping you heard what Jesse said, which is again, this is what makes Judaism special. So yes, Jesse was talking about the questions that were asked when we get to the world to come. And I will bring those out.
I said the heavenly court.
Yeah, the heavenly court. The world to come, but yes, the questions that were asked when we die. Questions were asked when we go. I'll bring them out next time. So, yeah, so this is an interesting little piece that they just gave us, which is this threefold existence of living in this world, lying down in the grave, and then being in the world to come. So this is, yeah. So again, you could see this theme of this is all about learning, about living in this world with Torah and trying to, trying to be both knowledgeable, right? But we're going to also see some stuff about this to be knowledgeable, but also, as he says right here, doing good deeds. Torah and good deeds alone.
Mhm.
Torah and good deeds. So let's take a look at this one. This one actually has some quotes from different parts of the Bible, but it's again similar to some of the things that we've said so far. But this one's an interesting one because also touches on some of the rabbinic beliefs and some of the things that we still believe. 5 possessions that the Holy Blessed One set aside as his own in this world. And these are they. So this is in this world. Again, it is important to say that it's very clearly saying in this world, right? So here they are. Some of them will be obvious. Some of them won't be. The Torah, one possession. Heaven and earth, another possession. Abraham, another possession. Israel, another possession. The temple, another possession. So it's saying that God has 5 things in this world that are his, that these are God's. So they're going to explain and they're going to quote where we find these lines. So the first, the Torah is one possession. From where do we know this? Since it is written, the Lord possessed, usually translated as created, Lord created or possessed, me at the beginning of his course, at the first of his works of old. And again, this is originally in the book of Proverbs, you can guess when you see this line. This is the lines from chapter 8. You can see God created, and the line here picks up in verse 22. But if you look at the whole section here, it is Chokhmah again. Ani Chokhmah. I, wisdom, live with prudence. I attain knowledge and foresight to fear the Lord. So this is wisdom talking, right? And here's wisdom saying, the Lord created me at the beginning of this course. So this is wisdom speaking. This is like wisdom speaking to us. So again, here, wisdom is Torah. They use it interchangeably. This is the Torah talking, essentially is what they're saying. The Torah made me at the beginning. So this is one of God's possessions here in this world. The other one says, heaven and earth is another possession. When do we know this? Since it is said, thus said the Lord, the heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. Where could you build a house for me? What place could serve as my abode? And this is a very famous section from Isaiah where God basically says, I'm everywhere. How can I be in one place? How can I be in one building? Well, you think it's interesting because couldn't they have quoted right from the beginning of Genesis where it says God made heaven and earth? That seems pretty obvious. But here's the line where God basically is laying out, I have heaven and earth, right? Everything is mine. Everything is mine. So there it's God speaking about the heaven and earth, not a description of heaven and earth being created by God, bless you, which is said in the third person, right? At the beginning, God created heaven and earth. This is God saying in the first person, the heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. That's God saying it. So that's why they quoted it there, right? It's an interesting line to quote, but it's very famous and very powerful. And it says, how many things you have made, O Lord. You have made them all with wisdom. The earth is full of your possessions. Now that's a line where it's in the third person, but it's somebody, actually it's in the second person. It's the psalmist saying it to God. You have made everything with your wisdom. It's full of your possessions, which is not exactly the same thing, but it's also kind of adding to it, which is that everything in the earth is yours too. It's all yours. Okay. So that's a beautiful line from Psalms, from Psalm 104. So there's 2 texts for that one. The earth and the heavens and everything in it. The next one is an interesting one. Abraham is another possession. From where do we know this? Since it is written, he blessed him, saying, blessed by Avram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. Well, there's two things in this. This is from Genesis. It's right at the beginning when we first meet Avram. He's not even called Abraham yet. He's still Avram. Where God changes his name. But it says that when it says that Avram is of God Most High, that's already telling us that he's God's. Avram of God Most High. But it also says possessor of heaven and earth. And we just read that God is the possessor of heaven and earth. So if God has given Avram this power and God is the possessor of heaven and earth, this is all like building on what we already heard. God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. So we just read God is the God of heaven and earth, and Avram is his. So it's building on that second one in the third one. The fourth one is all of us. Not Jacob/Israel, it's the nation of Israel. Look, you can see. Israel is another possession. From where do we know this? Since it is written, till your people cross over, O Lord, till your people whom you have possessed. This is one of the words that's used for us as God's possession, that we are God's possession. And this is from Exodus. This is from the Song of the Sea. This is from Shirat Hayam, when we crossed the Red Sea. So it's a very famous scene. It's a very famous text. There's a lot of times when we're called God's possession, we're God's chosen possession, God's holy possession, God's treasure. But here it uses the word possession, and it's such a critical scene because look, we're free and we recognize that we're God's possession. But there's another line, and it says, as to the holy and mighty ones that are in the land, my whole desire possession is in them. Now that one's a little strange because it doesn't seem like it's even talking about just Israel or all of Israel, but they're applying it to all of us. And again, it's one of the kinds of things that you see here, which is that they're bringing in lines from Psalms. Why do the rabbis do that? Well, definitely in Pirke Avot, the rabbis are drawing from Proverbs and Psalms because to some extent, those they know that those we call them wisdom literature because they're Proverbs, well, Psalms first, then Proverbs, and then also Ecclesiastes. And also people usually include Job in the books that they call wisdom literature. They're literature that we determine to be, and scholars have said, these are from a point of view of trying to teach us things. And so we call them wisdom literature because they are assumedly our ancestors are trying to teach us things from those books. Now, Psalms is interesting because, like, if I tell you that Psalms are wisdom literature, you'd say, well, aren't those songs? Yeah, they're songs. That's what they were written for. But because they contain so many lines like this, and because they're filled with inspirational sayings, they've been grouped as wisdom literature. And like, I mean, to me, they're a book of songs. They're 150 songs. But if you look at the way scholars organize the Bible, and I'm talking about Jewish scholars and Christian scholars, but also Jewish scholars have followed the same kinds of I'll just show you, when we look at, this is something that I showed to people on our Tuesday class. This is the way the Bible, shows you the chapters and verses for each book. But when you look at you look at this organization of our Bible, and again, this is a Christian site, but it's very similar to what you'd see on a Jewish site too. But you see the books, Job, Psalms, they divided into 3 books, but it doesn't really matter. Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and then they added Shir HaShirim, which is love poetry. But again, when you're going to put it in a place, That's the way they put it. They put it in those sections. That's the way they divided it up. So when you look at those divisions or those kind of ways, and again, those are somewhat arbitrary. It's not like we have to look at them that way, but that's when you know that scholars consider Psalms and Proverbs wisdom literature. The rabbis maybe didn't call it wisdom literature, but they knew that it was a special part of the Bible. They knew it was a special section that didn't tell stories, right? It wasn't prophetic books. I mean, they do bring in prophetic books. Don't get me wrong. Here's Isaiah. We read a guy, but bringing in prophetic books here doesn't really serve their purpose. Bringing in wisdom literature, especially in Pirke Avot, especially in other parts of the Talmud, and it's in the Midrash too, is it shows how wide the rabbis want to draw the Bible. They want to draw in things that you'd expect, and they also want to draw in things that you wouldn't expect. They want you to know that these sections are holy, that these parts of the Bible are holy, and the sections themselves, if you don't think, well, God didn't say those, God didn't say Proverbs, God didn't say Psalms. Wait a second. They're holy books, and we rely on them for guidance, just like we would Genesis or Isaiah or Exodus. Yeah.
What was the actual Bible? You know,
During this time. So during the time that these guys are quoting it, so that's one of the ways we know when you ask, like, well, first of all, there are sections. We're going to look at it, by the way. We are going to look at how the rabbis decided it. There's not a lot about it in the Talmud. You'd think there'd be a whole tractate on how they decided what would be in the Bible, but there is a discussion about what was the thought process for how they assembled the Bible. But it was done at a time when Rabbi Akiva is quoted as being a part of that discussion. So this is around the same time as these guys are discussing it. But one of the reasons we know is they don't quote books that aren't in the Bible. Let me step back for a second. There's one book that they occasionally reference, which is not in the Bible, which is in the Apocrypha, and is one of the few books that was quoted. It also made its way into the Dead Sea Scrolls, and so it was considered to be, like, I would say, on the cusp of getting into the Bible. But I'll show you. But it's not quoted a lot, and it's not that look. Part of the problem is the rabbis might have been quoting other stuff that we just don't know what it was because it's lost to us. So it could be that they quoted other places, and we just don't even know what the reference is, right? So there is one other book that I'm going to show you right now that the rabbis do quote, and then, as I said, almost made it probably into the Bible. They made it into the green stuff here is stuff that's not in our Bible. It's what they call Apocrypha. It's the books that didn't quite make it in. And you see one of some of them. So this one in particular right here, well, there's two books here that are in the Apocrypha, but this one right here, which we call Sirach or Ecclesiasticus, not Ecclesiastes, because that's in here. That's in the Bible, and that's in our wisdom books. But there's another one called Ben Sirach or Ecclesiasticus, and that is a book that the rabbis quoted. You can see it's a fairly long book. It's 1,370 verses. That's a long book. It's longer than Job. Not as long as Psalms, but Psalms is super long. But you can see it's longer than Isaiah. I mean, it's a long book. It's 51 chapters. You can see how long it is. So Ecclesiasticus did not make it into the Bible, but it's wisdom literature. And so it was, the rabbis thought highly of it. Here's some other stuff, like you can see, all the green stuff is in the reason why there's a green here on Daniel is there's parts of Daniel that are not in the Bible. They're in the Apocrypha and they're kept, but not by us, but they were kept. And same with Esther. There's an extra chapter of Esther that we don't have. That's in the Apocrypha. It's the Catholics kept it. So the Catholics have it, and we don't have it. But you'll see right here, the Protestant-related translations of the Bible, thus when considering Old Testament, they usually don't include the Apocrypha, or again, sometimes called deuterocanonical books, right? Yet these 7 books, as well as additional chapters of Esther and Daniel, are also considered canonical by Catholics and Orthodox Christians throughout the world. So they They showed you where how long these other books are, just in case you're Catholic and you want to know, or Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, and you want to know how those books then stack up against the other parts of the Bible. But yes, Jews and Protestants don't have that in our Bible. Thank God for the Catholics, because otherwise we wouldn't have the books of the Maccabees.
Did we get our hands on that?
What?
These other books?
Could we?
Ethics out?
Yeah, I have one right there. Oh, yeah. We've read them before. We read the books of the Maccabees years ago. We read the first two books of the Maccabees. But they're hard to read. I mean, they're not hard to read, but they're not like, they have a lot of stuff in there that
Old English?
people, it's not just that, it's like people just aren't that interested in it, because a lot of it is about the Maccabees, who we like the Maccabees to some extent, but we also know that they weren't really good people, especially after the first 5 brothers were killed, except for one. The rest of them don't really behave very well. So we don't look at them as heroes. And we didn't keep history for just the sake of having history.
Sure.
If, as I said before, the Bible is not history. It's not a history book. People use it as a way to like determine some history, because in some cases it's the only history we have, but it's not a history book. So, well, let's finish this text. So Israel is one of his possessions. And then let's look at this next one. The next one is the temple is another possession. Where do we learn this? Since it is said, the sanctuary, Lord, which your hands have established. That's from Exodus, which is weird because that's also from, it's also,
Interesting, because by this time, the second temple was already destroyed, correct?
yeah. So the second temple was already destroyed. What's interesting about this text here is that this line that we just read, verse 17, the one they just quoted, you will bring them and plant them on your holy mountain, the place where you dwell in Adonai, the sanctuary, O my Lord, which your hands established. Folks, this is part of the Shirat HaYam. Who is like you, God, among the celestials? Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh. This is the song of the sea. Right? This is chapter 15. This is the song of the sea. So you're telling me that the song of the sea already is talking about the Beit Hamikdash, talking about the temple? Interesting. So, however you want to look at it, here in this context, the rabbis are definitely saying, what's the point of this? The point is that this is part of God's possessions. This is what God owns. This is God's. God has the holy temple because it says God hands have established. Now you just saw something else that's a little problematic. The Song of the Sea says it's already been established. It was written, I mean, they're singing it when they cross the sea. It's going to be 300 years before they make the temple. So the assumption that most people have is the Song of the Sea is very old. The assumption is it goes back to maybe even older, one of the oldest sections of the Bible, like that it existed before the other authors like J.E., like maybe it's that old. Yeah. So we think that it's very old. Even Torah scholars think it's very old. But here's the issue. If we look at, I'll show it to you real quick, the Shirat HaYam. If we look at the Shirat HaYam, it says right here, is a poem that appears in the book of Exodus. This is Wikipedia's entrance, okay? So important, right? It's part of our liturgy. It's written in a style of Hebrew much older than that of the rest of Exodus. A number of scholars consider it the oldest surviving text describing the Exodus, dating to the pre-monarchic period. An alternative is that it was deliberately written in an archaic style, a known literary device. As such, proposed dates for composition range from the 13th, which would be when it happened, from the time of Moses, to the 5th century BCE. Now, here is an interesting thing that says that they have found fragments of it, right? There's parts of it that you'll see in the Dead Sea Scrolls, not necessarily written in the same way, but let me just show you. Well, it doesn't really say anything else. Other than, again, perhaps it's old, the oldest text, but even if it is, it still could have been written. And what they didn't say here, which I will tell you, which some biblical scholars say, is that it was written earlier. It was not necessarily written pre-monarchic, but it was written not long after the temple was established. It could have been written in the 10th or 11th century BCE, and then the rest of the Bible, let's not say the rest of the Bible, the rest of Exodus, the rest of Exodus might have been written in the 7th or 8th century. So it's possible that it was written 100 or 200 years earlier, but still after the time that the temple was actually already established. So this is an interesting thing. Again, I don't want to dwell on it too much. That was not the purpose of this, but it does say, that they're going to have this temple, the sanctuary, O Lord, which your hands have established. Okay. So the last part, the last line is from Psalms again. So each one of these lines or of these things has, well, not all of them have another line, but all of them, they don't all have two lines of text of proof, but they all have a line, not all of them, but from Proverbs or Psalms. So Proverbs, Psalms, Psalms, Psalms. 1, 2, 3, 4. Wait, I'm missing one. 1, 2. Oh, 3 doesn't have one for Abraham. Doesn't have Psalms. 4, 5. So 4 of the 5 have. And in the last part it says, and he brought them to his holy realm, to the mountain which his right hand had possessed, which again is from Psalms, referring to the temple. So these are God's possessions in this world. So next week, we're going to come back and we're going to finish the text.
Really?
Yes. But the problem is, and you're going to ask yourselves, what are we doing after that?
What do you mean you have to
Yeah,
have?
what are we doing after that?
You have to come back.
Put it all together.
No, you have to come to see what we're going to do next week because no,
Yeah.
I know.
Hey, bye-bye.
No, because it's very exciting. And I want to,
No, but
You see that?
well.
no, I do.
I love a
won't-
teaser.
Don't. Mike's saying I'm teasing it. Okay, well, sorry, you're not gonna get it out of me. Because yes, just what you'd like to do. What happened to, oh, it's over already.
Yeah, they played.
Yeah, they played this morning.
3-2 they lost.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, Mike was very upset.
Really?
He's disappointed.
Man,
He's disappointed in the Dodgers.
so far.
They're only in first place by 3 games. So he's very upset that they only have a 660. They're not quite 700. Stop it, Mike. Actually, the Pirates do have a better record than them right now. That's disappointing because the Pirates are spending less than Mookie Betts' contract. Anyways, folks, we'll finish up next week, Pirke Avot, which is ironic because we're supposed to start it again at Passover, or at least after Passover. So you can read it on your own or teach it to someone else. Teach it to someone you love, because now we'll finish it before Passover. Thank you. You can all teach Pirke Avot to other people that you love for the next 6 weeks until Shavuot. You're supposed to read it. So now you can read it with somebody else. Teach somebody else. Thank you, everybody. Yeah. Well, Shavuot.
Thank you,
is
Rabbi.
7 weeks later. All right,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank
Bye,
you so
everyone.
much.
We'll fix it
Thank
for
you,
next month.
Rabbi.
Yeah, yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you.